Yeah. Okay. Okay, and some administration, click up on that Ronnie Hell at the top that says Black Man Spy. Up will pop three subscription buttons for myself and for Roger. Please follow Roger if you're following me. I am still trying to get to 100,000. We're just 3,000 short of 100,000 followers. Please share this with your friends. If you are watching this on YouTube, you can come to anonymous.substack.com and you can watch this discussion. We've been getting awesome comments on YouTube. Only 30, 40,000 vision watches today of our podcast, which is pretty good. And we're pushing 200,000 up there against like 20,000 people. But it's not because I don't get anything out of it, right? I don't get big money out of YouTube at all. I get nothing out of Apple Podcasts except that this is where I do most of my I had 4 weeks of vacation. Yeah, because they're all like 20-hour work weeks. Wife and the kids are on the beach. I'm sitting there at meetings the boat. Well, you know, we have a historic war that is proportions. Everyone hit the like button because we've been covering it every day, so there's no excuse to show. Scott, I wanted to begin, of course, we have Trump's temper tantrums that we will get to. He's fuming right now. He's lashing out at everybody. And one of the big reasons for this is because underreported is the fact that Iran has essentially attacked a oil tanker off the coast of Dubai. And this comes after major threats against Iran's energy system. But this tanker was fully loaded, according to Reuters. And immediately after that, oil prices jumped in a huge way, three whole dollars in a matter of hours. And now the average gas price in the United States is $4 a gallon. And here is the report from Kuwait itself, from the Kuwait Petroleum Corporation. A giant Kuwaiti oil tanker was subjected to a direct and sinful Iranian targeting while President Dubai port in the UAE, and it was fully loaded. Scott, Iran keeps hitting. The heck, it keeps striking at these very strategic targets, especially the tankers. Donald Trump is saying that UK, France, Europe, everyone can get their own oil from the Strait of Hormuz. It seems to be getting a little jittery about what's going on. Where do you see the war now, especially since it seems like Iran has, and you can question me if I'm wrong or correct me, has seized the initiative in this war. Iran is making hits, and it seems like the U.S. and its so-called allies are responding. Yeah, it's simple. Very simple. After that point, I don't know what to do anymore. It's just simple. I mean, honestly, it's simple for us to even discuss because Donald Trump is going to tell a lie. He has obliterated, destroyed, and keep using the word decimated incorrect. Zelensky is more like decimated than one then. Iran, like every day. The president wins bigly. He's won bigly. He's won bigly so much, he's tired of winning. I mean, he's destroyed everybody. There's nothing left. But and it's simple to even mention that Iran is actually still shooting back. We don't know what they're shooting back. Everything's destroyed. I mean, I think they destroyed like 120 ships. The Iranian Navy, like Gaza, maybe, but they did take a couple ferries, so I guess those count as warships now.
Sometimes up there, it's 2012, 25 years. The first thing was this neck bird, the native, just kind of over here. This is the safety thing. Now we're going to move this guard here. We're going to rotate this conical down around the crankshaft, comes up then from the crankshaft to the tensioner, then up around the water pump, and finally finishing up at an idler here before going back to the alternator. Here is a shot of the belt path. And what we're going to be interested in is to remove this little belt. It's right here. Tensioner. You're going to require nothing more than 15 millimeter socket on the breaker bar. Okay, so down here with our breaker bar. Let's slip up. The alternator. And then this comes up to the C. Sorry, letter.
Show the fucking diagram.
And hold every breaker bar. Hold the tensioner. You're going to get tension on position. And put the belt on. And do put this down like this. You put the breaker bar underneath the electric fan here. So now you can thread this without having to hold tension on while we do it. Okay, let's start by putting the belt around the crankshaft. And then it comes up around the tensioner. Out of the belt path. And what we're going to be interested in is to remove this little belt. It's right here. The tensioner. You're going to require nothing more than 15 millimeter socket on the breaker bar. Put it on the tensioner. Okay, so downward with our breaker bar. We'll slip it up. The alternator. And then just comes out to the C. Water pump. Idler. And crankshaft. One thing you can do for reinstalling is hold every breaker bar, hold the tensioner in the tension on position, and you put the belt on. You do put this down like this. You put the breaker bar underneath the electric fan here. So now you can thread this without having to hold tension on while we do it. Okay, let's start by putting the belt on the crankshaft. And then it comes up around the tensioner. After the tensioner on this side, the water pump. And now it comes down underneath this idler. While the other end comes around the air conditioning compressor. And finishing up on the alternator. Make sure everything is seated in the groove. Alright. And now all we have to do is take our bar down here. Let's see it. Trying to show it a little better. Because this does make it easier. Now the bar goes down a little bit further. So we're pushing that down and slipping it on. Slipping it over the alternator pulley. Check everything to make sure it's all in the grooves. And release the tension. And remove your water. Yeah, okay, as I expected, this is what I had. There was one off on the lip pulley. The lip is riding on the lip. That's what we have now. Okay, let's put a guard bit on. The pulley's on. I'm going to have it about this position. We don't want it all the way out for a whole minute. Because we're going to And here. P12 script. Drive. AT&T just gave me the best deal on the Samsung Galaxy S26 Ultra. I'm telling everyone. Barber, dentist, I got a hardware guy. We're gonna have him.
Get the new Samsung Galaxy S26 Ultra on us with eligible trade in any condition. Most expensive plan now apply.
Viewers, welcome back to the Self-Made Out Channel. That's a 2011 Super. Let's see how bad. It's got a big 2.5. Got about a $140 on the clock. Guy has not done the time about the water pump job yet. I think we've probably done a video on one of these. I'm sure we probably have, but this is what we got to work on this morning. And like I said, the next time I'm bringing in, I'm making a video for the people. Here we are. And I'm hoping this little guy's going to cooperate with this. I see the lower radio goes there, the hose pipes on them are quite rusty. It's swole, and that can usually mean that the lower bolts on the timing cover are rusty and swole, and they can be kind of a pisser to take off. Well, let's do what we gotta do, folks. Let's get started. I think what I'll do to try to make it a little more easy, kind of really kind of try to record this video like this, but I think I'm gonna take both fans out where I ordinarily wouldn't. Just to do a timing belt. But I think I'll do that. It's just a couple bolts on those if they want to cooperate. We're making a mold out of the mold built here. So let's get started. There are little sprits there to give us some hope on these fan screws. That one's pretty crusty. Wiggle this thing out of the way. Okay, we'll get this little guy out of the way. We'll mark our belt this side out because we're going to be reusing the serpentine belt. This right here, it's less likely to squeal and carry on. I was just put them on the same direction that they were. Might be a waste of time, but like that. Now these fan bolts. You gotta be real careful with these things, boy. They won't twist and just snap off. They'll break off the top of the radiator here where the square nut is captured inside this little piece of plastic. You go to turn it, you snap. Next thing you know, you got a broken radiator. You get the coolant jug out. You get it right here. Oh, get some seat friction. I think I can do it. I can show you. Push this little tab in here. And then you push the jug out. See what you do. And that's it. That's all you need to do. Like I said, put the hose like so, and then just slip right out. This is out here before the coil completely dissolves. That's not feeling good. So I don't think it's great. This one, not so great. These won't snap off. This one won't. Well, I thought that coil was going to just dissolve that hole, but it seems it's not. This one's feeling okay. This one's feeling okay. But I have to work this one a little bit. I'll show you a tip to keep it from breaking out that radiator. Just take your needle nose vice grips. It's not really just a sort of trick, but don't crush it. But you have to put enough pressure on it. You'll keep that square nut from trying to spin in there. And then this gives you something to hold. I guess. going to a great time in a great place. Firestone Complete Auto Care. Congress uncovered a $3 billion network that's underwriting all this no case protest. It turns out that communist China and George Soros and the Democrat Party have joined forces, okay, to end democracy in America. I really want you to look at this man because what you're looking at is a tragic and inevitable result of a media ecosystem that is specifically based on information class theory of ghosts. So all that great economies and burning wall, global inflation skyrockets back up to 4%. Democrat focus allies are not going to dump in U.S. treasuries. You got this guy. Not even good at the bar. He is terrified of anti-communist takeover. Well, this guy's terrified of Chinese billionaires. Well, he's terrified of George Soros. Well, he's terrified of any kind of business the mainstream media has told them behind all of his troubles. The U.S. government is selling out all the U.S. auto manufacturing jobs over there. That's the consequence of the tariff play that the government has decided to use. You got Chinese EVs that are coming into Canada. You have reduced tariffs in India. You have reduced tariffs in Australia. Meaning that the age of American dominance globally as far as auto manufacturing goes is over. We handed it over to Europe. But no, yeah, be afraid of the Chinese billionaires. They're the real dangerous. Trump is one of us, okay? He's not a politician, and that's why they hate him so bad. We finally have a leader that cannot be bought because he had all the money he ever wanted when he became president. He donates his salary. All he cares is about saving this country and getting it back on track. Man, I really have to applaud the political theater here because the frame a guy who spent his entire life plastering his name in gold and skyscrapers all over the world, rubbing shoulders with the Wall Street elite to frame him as a populist anti-establishment hero. We're talking about how he's giving away his salary, but in this year alone, he's made $4 billion. By the end of his term, if he actually makes it the entire 4 years, the guy's gonna make like $20-50 billion. But somehow all that's completely justified because the president's giving up a couple $100,000 a year of his salary. All that while at the same time, this guy is probably dependent on Social Security or something like that, has to pay more at the grocery store. His health care is going to cost more. And if he's a veteran, which he might be, honestly, VA healthcare personnel can absolutely gut it. It's a ludicrous statement. But there's more than that. You have to remember that they look at this reality TV star like he's the second coming of Christ. Look, if your standard for the chosen one is someone who looks like they were sculpted by a big glob of Kraft macaroni and cheese, yeah, he's your guy. But if we just look at the math, I mean, you can see how this kind of frame of thinking is just not only flawed, it's false. It's all the result of an algorithmic conditioning. Because if we look at the global situation right now, if we look at the geopolitics, if we look at the trade deals that are happening, the consequences of our allies, you have Japan who's panic dumping their strategic reserves. You have the U.S. government who has essentially conceded control of the global oil market, which has only strengthened the petro-yuan, but he doesn't know that. He doesn't know that because, like I said, the mainstream media has indoctrinated him into believing nothing else except a culture war. The culture war is everything. The culture war is the vote. Don't look at the increasing cost of grocery stores. Don't look at the fact that people can't afford to buy homes. Don't look at the fact that people can't afford to have kids. This guy's talking about a communist takeover, but the fact is, the complete erosion of life in America has been happening for a very long time, but the acceleration that we've seen this year alone pretty much ensures the economic collapse of America in the short term. And we're talking about, what, 5 years until Social Security is insolvent? That's a massive problem, especially for a gentleman like this. If he's so conditioned to hate any kind of social service or social safety net because he thinks that it supports some kind of communist ideology, Christian principles and democracy.
What you just watched is a man's mental grid absolutely fail. His brain is so saturated by manufactured fear that he can't see that the nation is actually liquidating itself in real time. You want to talk about this president of the United States being the example of leadership America needed, a true Christian leader, a man of morals and principle, one that cares truly about democracy. January 6th was a thing that happened that internationally was seen as an attempted coup. The man has been in countless marriages, has had countless trips. The guy was best friends with one of the most notorious predators of all time. The man is gleeful. He celebrates the death of everyone, whether it's someone from Hollywood who said something bad about him a couple times, or when a J-Dan is called to take out some 12-year-old who's carrying water for his family. This is the perfect example of a Christian leader that America needs, of a Christian America, which it might be to these people. Then America shouldn't be a Christian country. It shouldn't be anyone. This country was founded on the inspiration of you can follow whatever religion you want. You have freedom of religion, you have freedom of speech. These things are only in danger because of the administration that this supports. Man, it makes your brain bleed a little bit watching this and just thinking about how they actually believe this bullshit. So we'd like the Guru to clarify this for us. Now, let's look at the Northeast protest. Let's look at what the actual working class are being geopolitically squeezed, trying to survive in the United States right now. So let's listen to what they have to say. I was having a conversation with my dad the other day. You know, my dad is retired General Sergeant in the Marine Corps. Recon, infantry guy, your stereotypical hard ass. That's what I grew up with. Love the guy that loves this country, loves the military. But I had a conversation with him and I asked him, with everything that's going on in the world right now, with how our military is being used, you still feel like we're the good guys? And he didn't hesitate at all. He said, no, we're not the good guys anymore. I never thought I would hear that come from my dad. My dad never truly left the military. My dad was blown up in his service. He's been living with severe symptoms of most of my life. But he's always loved this country. And he's always no matter what. And for him to see what's happening right now, he's saying that he no longer sees the country that he served as the good guy. That says more to me about where our nation actually finds itself now than anything else I could possibly find on the internet, than any journalistic article, than any philosophical summary. And I know that if my dad feels that way, maybe he's never voted Democrat in his life, but if he is feeling that way, then how many tens of millions of people have defected from their original stance and their beliefs in what America was, that it's always the good guy, that it's the greatest, most powerful nation in the world, that it's how Americans actually view what it's about. You can say, well, there's no king in America. We have a president who is duly elected, sworn in. Yes, that's true. Everyone knows that. We know that there's no king, and there's the same reason why you see these kind of protests happening all over the world. It has nothing truly to do with the reality of monarchy. It's the idea of monarchy. It's the idea of bringing us back to an age that we can work collectively across nearly every culture of humanity. We see this administration, the think tanks that stand around this president, the global elite, the asset class, Wall Street, we see them for what they are. People who position themselves as neo-nobles, who see the average American person as a peasant, a plebeian, a serf, someone who is there because God designated them to produce the profit that rightfully belongs to the elite that are chosen. And this man, whether he knows it or not, that's what he's defending. And MAGA in general, whether they know it or not, that's what they're defending. And the people who want to know kings, that's what they oppose. That's the understanding that the world needs to understand. No free protest had over 8 million people show up to it, including many of you who are watching this right now. You know what it's about. You know that it was non-violent. You know that people were just out there and they were having a good time. Because you have to be able to celebrate in the face of adversity. You have to be able to celebrate when your adversaries watch you. But then you can't just languish in some kind of failing morale. Morale is everything in the battle for justice. Exactly what it's about.
MAGA supporter from the very beginning. I believed in him. I thought that he would end wars, and he said in his campaign, he said he wouldn't start war.
This is exactly what we challenge the narrative that there's so much crazy leftist news out there. They're actually showing once people are out there and stuff, a fully devoted, their version of the Bible is the Communist Manifesto. It's not what it is at all. It's people of all stripes. And the fact is, MAGA has been losing its support. This is the most unpopular president of the United States. So there's many people. We're seeing him do they're saying that yes. Designed to prevent people coming together from all walks of life. People who spent 30 years in the military, people who voted for MAGA, people who are just struggling to survive, people who are so doing that they have no choice but to vote. It's not just a good time for them, it is a necessity to keep things in our country happen before it all falls apart at last. And that nature media might tell people that we are in a golden age, somehow still trying to drive that line, or that the war in the Middle East right now is completely necessary, that it's okay to send tens of thousands of our sons and daughters to die for the interest of big oil in America. The average American person who lives in the reality of consequence policy sees it for what it is, a failure for the American people, a failure of representation, a failure to represent America. The truth is, the Cold War is a manufactured plan. Manufactured for distraction, the working class by having some kind of class consciousness. But we are in a class war. And it goes beyond borders, truly it does. And it's good to see Americans coming together and realize that it is not just left versus right anymore, that it is top versus bottom. And that 99% of those who live in America are on the bottom, the 1%, are doing everything within their power to make their lives more difficult so they can't go out there and do things like protest on No King's Day. No King's Day should be a permanent day. It should be a permanent exactly why it's done on the weekend, because people are so limited. I know it's been a heavy week, and I really wanted to give you guys kind of a chance to take a break from the heavy macroeconomic fallout that's coming from this administration and kind of have a chance to laugh, if you are, at the absurdity that's coming from the base and supporters for this administration. Because I think we're all realizing that there's a complete gap in the reality, and this media bubble is truly unbridgeable. Because like I said, the media wants us to fight a culture war to ignore the fact that we are in a class war. But I know that you guys see it. Whether you're in America or you're watching internationally, you see it. You're watching from the outside, you're seeing our allies walk away from us, and you're probably happy about that. And honestly, as somebody who tries to look in from the outside, I can tell you that it is a good thing to protect yourselves from what's happening and what's going to happen in the United States. And these are difficult times, but the kind of solidarity that we're seeing is very promising. Because I truly do believe that once all this is over, which it will be over one day because tyrants eventually all go away. This man is incredibly old. All he eats is filet-o-fish and drink Diet Cokes. He's not going to live forever. This has left such a scar on the American psyche that his children will not rule this country. And America will come out the other side and be a respectful nation once again. Because I think the silver lining to all of this is what's being birthed right now across the country is a new American ideology. The one born through trauma bonding, but one that I think will lead to American prosperity and revival and purpose of what it truly means to be not just an American, but a global citizen, a human being, living beyond the tribe, living on this planet. But tell me what you guys think in the comment section. Like and subscribe. You know, think about doing a donation, always helps the channel. Think about becoming a member. So it's good. I look at chapter, especially if you're over 65, you're an American, and you need a little bit of guidance when it comes to your Medicare. There's a reason I chose them over the hundreds of offers for sponsors that we get. But you are appreciated as always. Your feelings are certainly validated. And I wish you all a very happy weekend. What's left of it, try to enjoy it. Get together with family and friends. Build those bonds, strengthen that community because at some point it's always going to happen. Food for thought as always. Take care. If you're on Medicare or you have a loved one on Medicare, you know how confusing, uncomfortable, and overwhelming it can be. And the fact is there's millions of seniors out there who are on the wrong Medicare program. They don't even know it. That's where Chapter comes in. Now, Call Chapter is free and there's no pressure to sign up. I think that that's great. If you're already on the right plan, Chapter will tell you, and if not, they're going to help you switch up. Now, Chapter is the only national Medicare advisor that actually compares every plan, so you can actually be sure that you're seeing all your options. We always talk about transparency being key in our videos, and that's why we like Chapter. Now, Chapter is completely independent, unbiased, and they advocate for you, not the insurance company, and that's what makes them different than a lot of the bad actors out there. That's why I chose to partner with them. Chapter can review your options in about 20 minutes, so it's nice, short, easy, and it'll help you stay in network with your preferred doctors. Because as someone who's married and has a kid, I know how important that is. So please don't gamble with your health coverage. Go ahead and reach out to Chapter. Talk to your live human being. See what your options are. Get into the right program. If you're in a program already, make sure it's the right program for you. To actually call them and talk to a live human. 845-363-6056. I'm going to leave a link in the description. So do what you can to look after yourself and work with Chapter. Probably make that a lot easier. So thanks.
Lyman gives me the best shine on sex protection. Your kitchen says a lot about you.
Racing the oils and R&D has turned the tables on the United States by using its control of the world growth rate to the needs of supporting the dollar. In this case, the oil henceforth, the oil trade is going to be used to be spent on non-dollar currencies. The maintenance of America's dollarization. So
Liana Petrova with a new episode of World Affairs in Context. Today I'm honored to welcome back Professor Michael Hudson, a renowned economist, distinguished research professor of economics, and author. By the way, I'm currently reading one of my books titled Super Imperialism, The Economic Strategy of American Empire, which I have it right here. It's become one of my favorite books. This book is absolutely fascinating, and I would say that it is so appropriate for anyone seeking to gain a deeper understanding of the current events in the world. This is the book to read. I highly recommend it. Please follow Michael on Patreon as well as his website. I will link both in the video description below. Professor Hudson, welcome back to the program. It's so great to see you again.
So it's good to be here back with so much happening in the world.
Yes, it's great to have you. By now, I think the majority of us would agree that Iran has masterfully used the Strait of Hormuz as leverage against the aggression of the United States and Israel. In recent days, there have been reports of Iran charging $2 million for a safe passage of vessels that are not linked to the United States and Israel. There are allegedly negotiations between Iran and several other states to settle Iranian crude oil sales in Chinese renminbi as well, and I thought that was a fascinating sort of turn of events. Can the US dollar survive the Iran war, and can it remain a global reserve currency? What is your interpretation of Iran retaliating not just militarily but also economically, and doing it so powerfully?
Well, closing the Strait of Hormuz always has been recognized as Iran's first and most obvious response. Way back in the 1970s, we were talking about that. First of all, the Strait of Hormuz has remained open all of this time. All of the threats that we're going to need an army to reopen it are irrelevant because Iran is, as we just pointed out, letting ships from India, Japan, and other countries use it. So there's been no need to liberate it. That's not what the imminent attack on Iran is all about. It's not about opening the Strait of Hormuz. It's not about stopping Iran from having an atom bomb, which it wasn't aiming for in all these past decades. And it's not even about stopping Iran from having missiles and dismantling them. It's always about the strategy that the United States has been planning and announced formally in 2003 when Wesley Clark, the general, said that they were going to, America was going to occupy 5 countries in 7 years, ending with Iran. The whole aim of America's using the Middle East to control the major source of oil exports is centered upon removing Iran from the picture, at least removing Iran's nationalistic leadership that overthrew the Shah from the picture. With Iran out of the picture, the United States can easily control the Arab OPEC countries as it's done now. So the whole pretense, the fight that's going to occur this weekend, Friday evening, Near Eastern time, Saturday morning U.S. time, is about sending troops to occupy an island in the strait or to force open the strait. That's all a diversionary effect. But what Iran has done so far, since you mentioned it, is put in place a very simple strategy. First of all, there's by charging this $2 million for OPEC Arab ships going through, it's made an advance payment on what it's going to be charging for reparations for the damage that's already been done by the United States and Israel against itself. And that it will simply use these charges to rebuild Iran. So, first of all, this has laid the groundwork for how Iran is going to impose reparations. Second, this prevents Trump from threatening the use of force because if the strait, if ships are going in and out through the strait, twice. It's not opposed to Iran done. So Trump is really trying to say, let our OPEC countries, companies export. We don't have to pay you any money at all. We want OPEC countries to have all the money so that they can do what they want as part of the American dollarized economic system. Well, third, pricing the oils in RMB has turned the tables on the United States by using its control of the world growth rate as a means of supporting the dollar. In this case, henceforth, the oil trade is going to be used to be spent on non-dollar currencies, the nightmare of America's dollarization. And fourth, just turns the tables also on U.S. government policy by using the threat of closing off oil as a means of imposing sanctions from other countries. The United States has been able to use the threat of closing OPEC oil to say it can turn off the energy flow to countries that are not agreeing to follow policies that follow the United States leadership. Well, here Iran is imposing sanctions on these countries, saying that the American allies, saying, well, if you're going to ally yourself with the United States and don't meet the terms for us breaking the U.S. control over the entire Middle East and its oil exports, then we're not going to let you conduct this trade. So this is the big U.S. big Iranian strategy that has led the United States to make all the threats that it's been making, using the Hormuz as just one of the excuses, and that is going to back what apparently Trump is going to announce this weekend.
Trump threatened to destroy Iran's energy infrastructure several days ago, and he gave around 48 hours. And then on Monday, first thing, he delayed the attack for 5 days. Earlier today, Trump also said that there is progress in talks with Iran. He actually, I think he pretty much went as far as to say we already won the war. Although, of course, Iran keeps denying any such talks are taking place and that there is any sort of negotiations between the United States, Israel, and Iran. But what's interesting is that in the meantime, in the backdrop of all of these events that I think are very much meant to distract and confuse, Trump's 5-day pause in the war is the exact amount of time that it takes for thousands of U.S. Marines to arrive in the region. So is Trump simply trying to sort of buy time, keep a lid on oil prices, and manipulate the stock market, or is he actually setting the scene for yet another escalation? As you said, there's you are expecting one this coming weekend.
There's a lot of wonderful commentary on there. Yesterday's Naked Capitalism had an article on its coffee break. Trump's taco designed to manipulate the market. Matt Stoller has an explanation of how this whole charade of, first of all, threatening last Friday to create chaos in the world economy, crashing the markets, pushing oil prices up and stock prices down, and then just a few minutes before the New York financial markets opened on Monday morning, saying, "Oh, we don't have to attack anyway. Iran has agreed to peaceful relations. We're on the way to agreement. I don't think there's any reason for the markets to be upset." Well, that led, of course, the markets to jump 1,100 points at one point on the New York Stock Exchange for the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and other averages followed. Well, it turns out that there were a lot of insider trades, apparently by Trump voters who were just
It does feel as though this war has been eye-opening from many different perspectives. Not only does it prove that the United States government is, for the most part, subservient to the interests of a foreign actor, Israel, but also it emphasizes the incompetence, the pure incompetence in Washington when it comes to diplomacy. In fact, Washington destroyed its own credibility by attacking Iran not once, but twice during high-level negotiations. So it would be very naive to think that, well, this time there's a difference. This time Trump is saying, is telling the truth. He's saying exactly what's happening. So arguably the credibility and the trustworthiness of a state are highly valuable assets, and I think it would be fair to say the United States has lost both of those assets. It effectively proved itself to be the major destabilizing force in the world. And many view this war as an opening act of the collapse of the U.S. empire. Would you agree with that perspective, Professor Hudson?
There was no incompetence in American diplomacy in the last few weeks. It was all a fake. And you know that when the United States made what it thought were unacceptable demands on Iran. They wanted Iran to remember what was the lead up on oversight of its missiles. Well, that was what the United States said. And the Omani referee for these came out and said, there's really a basis for peace. That terrified the United States because Iran called America's bluff. They said, okay, it's not worth having a war, and we know that we can win it, but we also know that in winning it, we're going to suffer a lot of damage by the U.S. and Israeli attacks, air attacks on our oil, our infrastructure, and our population. We're willing to pay a real heavy price to avoid that war, so we're agreeing. Well, this panicked the United States so much that they said, we've got to immediately start attack Iran so that it cannot say there's no need for an attack. The United States was dead set already that the aim of these negotiations was just a pretense, a public relations exercise to justify the attack on Iran. And Iran prevented that, and that was the trigger. I wrote all about this in an article, the articles that I've been doing for Democracy Collaborative, and putting on my site and on other sites as well. So the United bluffing is not really a negotiation. America never came out with saying outright, what is it we want from Iran? Well, of course it hasn't, because what it wants from Iran is to control the entire Near East. Not only Iran, but the entire Middle Eastern oil trade, so that it can get a choke point, a stranglehold on the world's supply of oil exports, so it can continue to use that as one of the fundamental levers of weaponizing its foreign trade policy and its foreign monetary policy. And all that was countered very adeptly by Iran.
The United States, if we look at this war and then look at, what other things that have been going on these past several years and definitely several, 12 months, we can, I think, tell that the United States is fighting against any country that is focused on achieving self-sufficiency in terms of energy security, in terms of food security, and of course information technology. AI is a big deal. It's being used in military and in so many different other areas. So are we effectively seeing a sign of an empire in decline, sort of that last stage of the U.S. empire in decline, where it needs to destroy others in order to stay in power and survive?
Well, it's destroying others by an attack on international law. What the United States is doing is violating all the rules of war, all the rules that were laid down in the United Nations Charter. This is not simply a war against Iran. The United States knows very well that this is the result of fighting Iran is going to be the OPEC oil trade for the rest of the year, probably well into next year, mainly war. This is the beginning of a long-term war to determine whether the United States can still maintain unipolar control of the world economy and prevent other countries, as you pointed out, from expressing their own sovereignty. When the idea of national sovereignty is the basis for all international law. So all of the countries of the world are threatened by this. This is what makes the war in Iran and last February 28th the official opening of World War III. It's a world war because the entire world needs energy and is going to be affected by the cutting oil exports, gas exports, fertilizer exports, and all of the production that is based on energy, electricity, oil for plastics, helium gas also, because Qatar's helium plants have been destroyed by Iran, and that has already caused frozen cryogenic helium is needed in order for the ultra-low violet lithography to etch computer chips and in a hard enough, cold enough form that it doesn't just spill all over. So the entire string of the world economy that has been based on interdependence with free oil exports is now being thrown into chaos, and this is going to affect the supply of fertilizer and hence agricultural yields. It'll probably affect the global south countries more than anyone else, and it's not only chaos, but there's never chaos at the end of a revolution. One country wins or another country will, and so the chaos is America's idea of putting it in a position where, because America is so self-sufficient in oil and many other material and food and other materials, it can come out ahead stronger than Asian countries or global south countries, and will be able to use its economic strength to control world diplomacy in the same way that it did after World War II. So this is a calculated. It's an attack on by the United States, not only on all other countries, but on the very principles that civilization was held to uphold. The idea of sovereignty, of no undeclared war, that if you are going to have a war, no attacks on civilians, especially on hospitals and basic infrastructure. Every rule of war and of international law has been broken by the United States. So the other countries, I think, are stunned into cognitive dissonance. They can't believe what they have to do to defend themselves, because as the chaos unfolds over the course of the coming year, the only defense is to create an entirely new system of international diplomacy to replace the United Nations in its present form, to replace the IMF and the World Bank, to replace all of the institutions that the United States has put in place as means of control, including the Trump tariffs that can just manipulate foreign access to the U.S. market. The whole rest of the world has to become independent of the United States, and what that will lead to is essentially isolating the United States instead of the United States being able to isolate its what it calls its adversaries for the rest of the world who do not follow its own policy. So this is really as much of a civilizational fight, if not more, as World War II was.
Certainly. Michael, you mentioned many times that at the core of this is at the core of the U.S. aggression is the desire to control energy, right, as a way to leverage power and as a way to control other states and their access to energy. The damage that has been done to the Gulf Cooperation Council infrastructure is enormous, and to Iran's infrastructure is enormous, and certainly it would take years to rebuild, to sort of go back to the same levels of production that have been sort of normal to them, to where they satisfy the demand. What's interesting is that U.S. news outlets are now openly admitting that we are seeing early warnings of stagflation ahead. So are we looking at stagflation, though, or are we looking at something much worse, such as a global depression, for example?
Yeah, it's a depression. Depressions are not inflationary. It's such, they're deflationary. So the whole idea, the whole pretense that, oil prices are going to go up, that's going to increase the price level, and that reduces the ability of financial claims and bond holdings to have command over commodities. That's all ideology. That's all free market libertarian ideology. If oil prices and gas prices and helium prices and fertilizer prices go up, but that's going to cause whole industries to close down. And that's going to put labor in these industries out of business. And a depression is friends. If people are buying stocks, then jump on the bandwagon and try to ride it up and jump out on that. And if markets are going down, then sell everything, sell them short, and then try to buy in at the bottom. That's the extent of their tunnel vision when it comes to understanding what's really going to happen. So the stock market is only a narrow slice of the economy without understanding the whole context within what prices and wealth and asset values and wage levels and purchasing power evolve.
I think if you look at Iran, it's been under sanctions for decades, and it is a regional middle power. I think that would be an appropriate way to describe it. And Iran has taken on a great power state, the United States, that's working hand in hand with a nuclear-armed Israel, which also has the strongest military in the Middle East. It goes without saying that to support war efforts, any state, whether it is the United States or Iran or any other state, it needs economic resources. And it's absolutely remarkable that after being subjected to Western sanctions for nearly 4 decades, Iran has proven itself to be such a strong adversary. It's in the driver's seat right now, as you pointed out. It has the leverage that it needs, and arguably it's established at least partial deterrence because Trump was forced to call off his 48-hour, ultimatum. So what does the Iran war reveal about the United States' ability to compete militarily or economically with not just middle powers such as Iran, but great powers such as China and Russia?
Well, we're going to find out this weekend. That, there must be some plan in place for what they're going to do with the battleships they have there, the aircraft carriers, all of the troops that are there. And we know that the United States can send bombs. I'm not sure they can send bombers because Iran has defenses against a lot of bombers. You mentioned Israel military. Israel's not going to get involved in this war. It's willing to fight to the last American in this war, but I don't think you're going to have the Israeli army is busy carving out Lebanon, so the Israelis will have a place to go after Israel's all bombed up. And the Israeli military defense is spent. They don't have any more defense. The whole idea of the Golden Dome was fictitious. It was all a joke. All of the American arms it has were not arms to really fight with, and the arms that the Gulf countries had were not arms that really worked. They were prestige arms. They were to have a parade with, sort of like having an expensive Mercedes automobile, but not actually to fight because they're ineffective against the Iranian arms. So there really isn't any American defense and military except trying to actually land all of these Marines, to fight to the last Marine. Well, according to all of the military commentators that I've been reading on almost every site, they all say these Marines, whether they're lacking in landing in the Strait of Hormuz and the Persian Gulf, or whether they're landing on the southern coast of Iran or in Baluchistan or moving from Azerbaijan or the Kurdish territory, wherever they are, they're going to be eaten up. And the generals must be aware of that because I don't think they have a clue as to just how thorough the Iranians have been able to defend themselves. I don't know. Nobody knows because it's secret. That's what they've said. And so we're going to find out, but I think the United States says, all right, this is going to be our Alamo. And just as the Americans said, remember the Alamo, to the great defeat of the Alamo, to try to mobilize patriotic support for the war, let's get vengeance on it. I think the American idea must be well, let's get vengeance on what the Iranians have done. war. And more, I think the American public, when they see the chaos and the expense that's going to be here, including on their own pocketbooks, not only for gasoline, but for agricultural products and for all of the products that we've been talking about that use oil and gas and other OPEC exports. They're going to say, well, this was Trump's war. This was the neocons' war. Some will say this is Israel's war, although it really is as much America's war as Israel's war. And they're not going to be supportive, and it does not bode well for the fortunes of Trump or the Republicans or the Democrats that are just as pro-war, just as in favor of this as the Republicans, as you can see in Congress's refusal to do anything at all to try to stop this war.
Michael, maybe the last question for today. With November midterms coming out, I would imagine that Republicans ought to be in panic mode. Donald Trump's approval ratings are underwater on every single issue, according to the most recent poll. Voters are juggling higher prices, economic instability, and of course a widening war with Iran, its consequences. And as you know from history, that kind of environment rarely favors the party in power. So Republicans are definitely on the hot seat. How much political will or political appetite is there in Washington, do you think, to continue this war of choice, given that gasoline prices are rising, food prices are rising, and those two things are sort of the most sensitive areas for the U.S. population?
What is Washington? What do you mean by Washington?
The foreign policy establishment, for the most part.
It's a one-man band. Right now, it's a one-man band. It's Trump and his coterie. He's appointed a cabinet that's completely loyal to himself. You have the Republican-controlled Senate by the South, the senator, Alabama senator. They're all in favor. They're all in favor of the suicide march. They're like Lemmings. They're not going to protest. They're all afraid of going against Trump. There is obviously a whole wing of the Republican Party, the isolationist wing, that's always been part of the Republican Party, but they seem to be in quite a minority. You just don't have many people. You have the Southerners are South Carolina and the others are all in favor of it, and the Democrats all are. If you look at who is paying for the campaign of America's senators and Republicans, it's payback. And they seem to only care about their paychecks. They don't care about who wins the war. They want their paychecks. That's what they shun, the utter corruption of the Senate and the Republicans, and the result of the Supreme Court's ruling that there's no limit on private contributions to campaigns has been essentially to privatize and financialize the election process in the United States. So the elections for the campaign that are determined by what politicians can raise the most campaign funding is all open to the highest bidder, and the Congress has set up a circular flow between the United States will give enormous amounts of money to Israel that will turn around and siphon some percentage of this cash into its own pocket to reward the senators and the Republicans, the representatives that have voted in its favor. Along with ISIS and Al-Qaeda is the second foreign region in the Middle East. You have a sort of self-financing, self-promotion way for the Congress people to get rich, including, no doubt, all of those insiders who made a killing last weekend on
right. Professor Michael Hudson, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for sharing your perspective on these events. I hope that you come back for a new episode, and I know our viewers are looking forward to seeing you here again.
Well, thanks for having me. And, we had a good discussion, and we'll see what happens this weekend.
$9.99. I mean, it's our best deal ever.
Pricing the oils and R&D is,
Joining us now is our great friend Rory Johnston. He's the founder of Commodity Context on Substack, which we highly recommend everybody go subscribe to. Go do that. Thanks for joining us, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me back.
All right, so Rory, let's start with your reaction to the Trump Taco Tuesday. Let's put this up here on the screen. All of those countries that can't get jet fuel because of Straits of Hormuz, like the United Kingdom, which is deeply involved in the capitation of Iran, I have a suggestion for you. Number one, buy from the U.S. to get plenty. Number two, build up some delayed curves. Go to the Strait. Just take it. You'll have to start learning how to fight for yourself. The USA won't be there anymore, just like we weren't there for us. Iran has been essentially decimated. The hard part is done. Go get your own oil. So as the premier oil analyst, how's that going to work?
I mean, it's just a wild statement from a U.S. president. I think just on 2 points here. Actually, let's go. I think there's a third point as well. So, hard part's done. You do the rest. Obviously, the rest is the part that's too hard for Trump to do himself. So I would say at this stage, it's not entirely sincere, although that's not shocking in this environment. I think the part that really hits like a hammer, though, is the go get your own oil exclamation mark, which is essentially like the epigraph on a book about the end of the Carter Doctrine, that the United States has been the policeman in this region of the world for decades. It has been the guarantor of these oil supplies and for the regional security of the Gulf kingdoms and Gulf states and Gulf, oil exporters. It's a complete rewriting of how this situation in the Middle East works. And when we're talking about unilateral taco, I kind of see the two most likely scenarios here as kind of the really, really bad scenario where the global economy goes into like a deep recession, we get $200 plus oil. That is the scenario I think that we've been grinding towards steadily and disconcertingly of boots on the ground, trying to take Cargo Islands, et cetera, et cetera. That's where you get prolonged closure of the strait, you get risk of further, attacks on the regional oil infrastructure, things that can't just be undone, things that are permanent or at least years long, durable. I think that's a scenario that I see that is so dire that I see it as very difficult to hold in my base case because I just don't think that any politician, less least alone Donald Trump, has the wherewithal to go through with kind of something so long and arduous like that. I think more likely here is the other scenario for my base case from the very beginning, which has been what I call the unilateral topic, which is people like, well, Trump can't just talk. This is not tariffs, this is not trade policy. He's very clearly already bored of this war. I think by this stage he plans to basically roll him over onto Cuba. I think that, I never thought that Trump planned to get this deep, but he never planned for once he was this deep. So I think if the consequences keep rising, and I don't think this is over yet, I think that we still need higher oil prices and lower equity prices and more economic pain to force that unilateral taco. But that's how I see this eventually going. If you want to even sitting there post, like, it's done. U.S. Navy sailing home. That's how I picture this ending.
Well, let's hit C0 up on the screen. We're now officially at an average over $4 a gallon for gas.
So a significant and not great milestone being reached here. Let's say that he does the full taco. Go get your own gas. We're out. Strait of Hormuz. There's new reality. There's new sheriff in town. We're gonna let Iran charge their toll, and you know you can do deals with them in Chinese yuan. We're out of here. Okay. Let's say that that is what happens. What is the damage that's already been done, and how will that trickle throughout the global economy?
Yeah, so the one thing I want to kind of stress here is that in no reasonable scenario coming out of the Iran war do I see the oil market being in a healthier or more secure position than which it entered the war.
Yeah.
So I think, any scenario is going to have structurally higher prices. I think in the scenario where you have, a boots on the ground drag out, $200 plus. I think in this scenario, a unilateral taco, Iran having some kind of sovereign control over the strait, which again is just an unthinkable thing to kind of consider long term, but that's what we're looking like we're at least trending towards possibly. In that scenario, I still think the oil price is currently, I'm looking at my screen, Brent's just about 117. I think that's still too low. I think that, even though this unilateral taco is bearish or a lower price environment than boots on the ground scenario, I think both of them are still dire and like a deeply untenable supply situation. I think in the scenario where Iran does continue to control the strait, then we're just gonna it's just setting us up very predictably for the next crisis. I think this is a situation that can't last. It is inherently politically untenable and unstable, and we're going to get the next flare up. So we go from a long, drawn out, awful Hormuz closure to maybe like a perennial 2-week closure in Hormuz, which seems like an insane thing to bake into the system. But that's kind of again what it's looking like we might be arriving at.
Yeah, it really does. Let's go and put A9 guys up on there on the screen. That's the bill that was being passed through Iran. They say that they would impose a toll system in rials, that they would ban passage of U.S. and Israeli vessels to the strait, assert Iranian sovereignty over Iranian government, and any country that imposes sanctions against Iran, Oman stays and help shape the legal framework.
By the way, that Oman piece is also pretty significant.
Yeah, so let's game this out. I was thinking earlier, how could you be the Gulf countries where you have to get off, you just got bombed by these people, and then you just pay them some sort of toll, and maybe they won't even want money, and they're like, bombs keep coming, the rest of the bases go. Like, that seems to be the reality. I mean, the UK, Japan, South Korea, all of these Asian countries, they would have to pay. I don't even know how they could get rials, by the way. I mean, is there a market, to exchange? Like, talk us through what that would look like.
Yeah. So just let's walk through the size of the poll first. So I think what we've seen discussed so far is a $2 million package, which sounds very expensive, but relative to like a VLCC or a very large crude carrier tanker, like the largest thing in the world, they carry this $2 million. So that's only about $1 a barrel on toll. That is expensive, but relative to the problematic status quo, it is a clear kind of beneficial change to the global supply situation. But to your point, the politics of this are deeply untenable, and it seems unlikely that Iran would allow it completely to reopen the strait. Again, prior to the war, you're having about 100 plus, 100 to 120 vessels crossing the strait every day. Maybe we get back up to 50% that. Then with some of the offsets that we have in the system, like the Saudi pipeline and other sources, maybe we get back to something that's just a huge deficit rather than a catastrophic supply deficit. But I think that's the scenario is that we just have some kind of durable control for Iran in this region, and the Gulf countries kind of having to see swallow the bitter pill, because the alternative is existential for them. This is existential for them as well, but at least in the scenario they continue exporting oil and restarting their economies, relative to right now, where virtually, by far, their large economic sector is completely silent.
The other thing Trump says offers as a solution, other than go get your own oil and good luck militarily in the Strait of Hormuz, is hey, come buy from us. We've got plenty of oil. Can you talk about how our supply fits into the global oil market and the reality of what that looks like as well?
Yeah, so definitely. So let's say Europe is one. So I think that's kind of who keeps
to Latin America. Mexico is the largest single recipient. So if Europe sort of overbid those, one, they would be paying a very great penny for them, and we would essentially be taking those flows away from Latin American importers. There's going to be a different entire world of birth. But I think also what's further going to complicate this is if this price continues, if prices get higher and more volatile, I think the one thing that a lot of people, a lot of analysts have been watching for is any signs that the Trump administration is going to pull the trigger on some kind of trade restrictions, which obviously, I mean, the ultimate result here would basically be that Trump starts the Iran war, destabilizes the trade, leaves and says, oh, by the way, we'll probably go get our oil or buy from us. They're like, okay, we'll buy from you. And then actually, we're going to ban the export of diesel in the first place, so go find it somewhere else. Like, this is it's a recurring cycle of kind of bad faith negotiations and diplomacy leading to just a situation that is, sure, the United States, relative to a large rest of the world, is going to be a relatively better spot because large amounts of production, I'm up in Toronto, we have secure supplies of Canadian food in the U.S. and the West in particular. They can't get from isolate to other regions. So the United States is in a good spot, but the United States exists in the global economy, and the U.S. can, just no matter how strong the U.S. economy is, it's going to feel this buffeting from a global economy if it's under that retrenchment of just a few years.
Something I really learned from you, Rory, is about why export would be a bad idea. You talked actually about refinery capacity, about the various different types of refineries and what they're built for. Some of those are foreign oil, some other foreign refineries built for U.S. oil, about how much that would distort the global market. So when people say, when Trump says you can come buy from us, I think what you're trying to hammer home is, yeah, they'll come buy from us, but we have to buy ours too, and that's really going to be expensive. So it could still be a $6 a gallon type scenario, depending on where the crude oil market and all of that goes. Not to mention, I mean, I know you're not an LNG expert either, but like that is also kind of critical. Last time I checked for Europe, could you just talk through that about why you're kind of screwed either way? If you do an export ban, you really would hurt the U.S. market, kind of forever. If you don't, we all sort of have to pay sky high prices.
Yeah, just to your point, even aside from the food quality and the kind of, refinery type stuff, even for the product side, if, the U.S. Gulf Coast is a net exporter of diesel, jet fuel, and other products like that, whereas the East and West Coast are net importers of gasoline. The relaxation and kind of suspension or waiving of the Jones Act could allow some more of those Gulf Coast barrels to the coast in a way that could help a market kind of U.S. petroleum trade work without completely breaking. But fundamentally, you need these export markets in order to clear additional, like I say, excess diesel from the U.S. Gulf Coast. If you ban the export of that, it initially manifests as what the White House sees a great thing, which is you have excess supplies, you have inventory that builds up, you have depressed diesel prices domestically briefly, which is going to sound like a great thing for a couple weeks until that surplus of diesel ends up forcing those Gulf Coast refineries to reduce their run rates because they can't put their diesel anywhere. And that means that you end up in a situation where you could actually end up running out or having a scarcity of gasoline in the U.S. Gulf Coast, which would be an insane thing. One thing I keep saying is that for advanced economies, this will largely manifest in debilitating price shocks because we have very low prices. Much of the world will not have that scenario, and they're going to feel the weight of just the supply losses. But actual scarcity and the lack of supply. But the way you can short circuit that ability for us to pay for these fuels is by beginning to muck with trade. And I think that is the temptation here. And again, that's my worry if this keeps going, where we could be headed.
Let's put C5 up on the screen. There was an announcement from Russia. They're planning to ban gasoline exports starting on April 1st. Russia obviously a major oil producer, significant global supplier. What is the significance of this?
Yeah, so I think you're seeing a lot of countries around the world. Russia is one example. China is another example. I think even more critically, that has banned the export of refined fuels. In 2022, they were a very important swing producer into that diesel-starved market. With Russia specifically, Russia isn't typically, it's a very, very minor net export of gasoline. And ever since Ukraine's attacks on domestic refining infrastructure, it's increasingly actually been pushed into a scenario of net imports. So the reason that they're banning exports is to kind of try and hold back as much of that gasoline as possible. The bigger concern would be if you started seeing Russia banning the export of diesel, because unlike gasoline, which are a minor export player, diesel are a major export player, more like a million barrels a day versus, let's say, gasoline 100,000 barrels a day. And in that scenario, again, diesel and Middle Distillate, the tightest area of the market, that would, really, really hurt in terms of those refining margins and pressures and those prices you and I see at the pump. The one thing on Moscow, I keep repeating this, that Moscow is the single largest beneficiary of the Iran war, both in terms of an overall higher price environment, explicit removal of sanctions by the U.S. Treasury against Russian and, shockingly, it's not even Iranian crude. And I think all of the pressure that has been very successfully imposed on the Russian oil industry, over the past, 8-9 months, that wasn't done in a month. And I think we're back to square one. I think the one rub to this is that the one person who knows it's been a boon and likely a windfall for Putin is Zelensky. And what we've seen over the past couple weeks is Ukrainian forces dramatically ramping up the attacks against Russian export infrastructure. Last week, Reuters had 40% of Russian oil export infrastructure was offline. Was the largest disruption to Russian supply in modern history, on top of the largest supply shock in the oil market's entire history happening as well. It's entirely separate. So there's this pro-cyclical element now that the higher oil prices go, the more pressure Ukraine is going to put on Russian exports, and that's going to put prices higher, and again, raise pressure further, even more geopolitical. My last question for you, man, is let's go C3. I love this map you put out there. I believe it was made by JP Morgan, which shows the actual, you said, where the air pocket, which is kind of the way you could think about it, bylaws, is moving through the world. So East Africa was already hit. East Asia this week, we're literally about to do an entire block about all of this global chaos and South Korean president being like, I can't sleep at night. Europe next week. And you see North America 2 more weeks. Now, the Secretary Hegseth took the podium this morning, basically refused to give some sort of timeline. The war is not going to end today, that's for sure. It's going to end sometime in the future. But you're saying 2 weeks coming up on that. What does that look like? We're already at $4 a gallon here in the U.S. nationally. Let's say 2 more weeks when that pocket hits us. How does that manifest? Are we going to have supply shortages? Are we going to be Australia with petrol stations that are closed? What's that look like for us? So I think the United States, like I was saying earlier, is in a beneficial and kind of privileged position that it likely won't immediately run into any major physical shortages. But to your point, it's like the U.S. average gas price is already back over $4 a gallon. The price pressure is going to keep coming. So, like that chart shows, that air pocket, and just to give you the logic of this, before the war, you had tankers leaving the Gulf for crude. It was like over a month or a month and a half to where they're going. Now that people are lost to those supplies and close the strait until the final tanker reaches your shores, behind which there's nothing but that's the air pocket. That air pocket is landing in Asia this week, Europe next week, and North America 2 weeks after. But look at that chart. North America also doesn't get that much oil from the Gulf. It used to get a lot more. The shale revolution and growth in Canadian production has largely displaced those barrels. But we got the back in the street, and Kansas is still an importer of fuel on the coast and of crude oil in the Gulf because of quality issues. Those barrels are imported. Between paper and financial futures and crude, physical market reliance on industries, that has remained fairly wide. When an air pocket lands, it's going to make those things together. We're going to see way more than manifest in the price of the future.
Rory, if you could best can sort of bottom line it for consumers who are listening, like what should their expectations be over the coming weeks?
It's going to be a very, very expensive driving season. Easily the most expensive driving season since 2022. And if this continues further, we will very, very likely see all-time high pump prices and all-time diesel prices again. Great. All right. Well, heading to the rainy weather, but it's a good one.
Gotta make a plan.
We trust you. You are not a sensational person. That's why we said that. Speaking of you,
He is a sensational person.
well, and trust me.
Not sensational.
He's not. What's the term? Terminable. You're not terminable in the oil space. Everybody go follow Rory. Thanks, man. Take care.
Joining us now to talk about the rapidly escalating economic polycrisis, we have Saurabh Amari, who is the editor of Unheard. Great to see you, Saurabh.
Good to see you, man. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So let's start with the picture with regards to oil, which is not looking great. You can put T4 up on the screen here. So as of this morning, right now in the markets, I think WTI is at about $101. Brent is at what, like 115, somewhere around there. But we have this Bloomberg analysis where a lot of analysts are saying this is going to get a lot worse. That reality has not completely sunk in. So what they say is the biggest oil supply shock in history has reached the 1 month mark. Prices have surged. Growth forecasts are being cut worldwide. Shortages are emerging across Asia, Thailand, to Pakistan. But the energy industry is warning the crisis is only beginning. And they float the possibility of oil going to $200 a barrel. So, are you in agreement with this analysis that we have not even grappled yet with the reality of how bad things are currently, let alone how bad things are going to get?
Yeah, I tend to agree with the more gloomy analysts out there. The reason being that what's not taken into account is the difference between this crisis and the 1970s, oil crisis that followed the Yom Kippur War. In that case, it was a matter of a political decision by the OPEC, the Arab OPEC members, to shut off or turn on the tap. Right, that's all that was involved. And once they decided politically to turn the tap back on, oil flowed again. In this case, the reason why this could be much more severe than the 1970s polycrises that are related to oil is the fact that even if the political decision was there, the political will was there to turn the tap back on, there's damage to the entire ecosystem that makes possible the flow of oil from the Persian Gulf through the Strait of Hormuz. Severe damage to oil facilities in obviously the GCC states to varying degrees. Some Iran started to hit those in response, I should say, to the Israeli attack on Iranian infrastructure. You have shut-in fields in Iraq, where a country that Indian Day would have like 4.3 million barrels, is now down to 1.6 million barrels. And after a while, when fields are shut in for a long time, it takes a long time to turn them back on. So, again, even if Iran tomorrow were to capitulate, which doesn't look likely at all, and were to reopen the Straits of Hormuz, the fundamental structural problem, the damage, the fact that in many of these cases, for example, this is oil, likely with LNG, but the Qataris have full force majeure for 3 to 5 years. So that's all going to take a long time to get back online. And during that time, you're going to see price spikes. You're going to see, right now I just read today in the New York Times that, 2 Australian states, 2 of their provinces have made public transit free in response. You're going to see more and more of that. You're going to see fertilizer plants that rely on petrochemical products go offline. That affects farming. I mean, the ramifications are huge and legitimately like Mad Max level terrifying. And the crazy thing is that it was all a choice. It was a word of choice. It was Donald Trump and his coterie deciding to do this, not something that was imposed on the United States or the world the way of like the pandemic was, where it's just this random event and okay, who can you blame? Here there is blame. It's like Didi and Donald Trump.
Yeah, it's so crazy. So let's just see you up there on the screen. After to basically to underscore what you're saying. Because in the Atlantic, welcome to a multi-dimensional economic disaster. And what they specifically tie here is the AI boom to a lot of the cheap energy. And of course, the data center already built out all these AI systems we're already having. This will all reflect a situation where you're going to have massive increases not only in energy costs globally, but they also talk about how the Gulf Arab states are basically guarantors and investors of some $100 billion into these companies. These AI companies basically the backbone of the U.S. stock market. And so you and I, we've been deeply concerned about U.S. industrial stocks now for quite some time. So we saw financial crisis, the energy shock, and we're already coming through effectively they got a reversing problem.
Yeah, so the one spot, as you said, based on equities markets with all these AI companies and the whole AI revolution and the potential growth that it was driving, also threatened jobs, I should say. But that was in two ways dependent on cheap energy. One was, of course, you mentioned that the data centers take enormous energy to run. Okay, that's one. And second, it was also dependent on just oil flowing, and therefore these Arab states having money that they can then invest in these projects. They're not going to invest if it's not making money. And so it's as simple as that. So that's like at the whole blow to the U.S. economy. It's one of the few bright spots in the U.S. economy that otherwise was lagging in other ways, that had been way too much focused on services and kind of low-level services and high-level financial services and so on. Okay, but now we're here at the cutting edge of the AI revolution, or we were, until this war was launched.
My issues with the AI revolution is there's no doubt that if the bubble stops, it's going to be extremely painful. And let me just bring, because there's one other angle of the hit to AI here that wasn't immediately apparent to me that the Atlantic lays out in this piece. They say one of the clearest examples of the problems are advanced memory and training chips, which are the most important or by far the most expensive components of training any AI model. Currently, most of these are produced by two companies in South Korea and one in Taiwan, something all of us have focused a lot on. These countries, in turn, get a large majority of their crude oil and much of their LNG, which helps fuel semiconductor manufacturing from the Persian Gulf. The chip companies also require helium, sulfur, and bromine, three key inputs to silicon wafers, large conversion. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and UAE, and other regional hyperstates have become key investors in the American AI firms that purchase most of those chips. And I think that's a really important example, but I also think, Saurabh, that it just underscores, it's almost impossible to wrap your head around the disruptions here. And the best analog we can look to is our recent past history with the combination of the Russia-Ukraine war and COVID, obviously, which screwed supply chains in a million ways that even, experts could not fully anticipate how it would, create problems and backlogs that would then go on to fuel inflation and have all of these residual, both real economic and political effects.
Yeah, and it's so infuriating, dismaying, scary, terrifying. I don't know which adjective to pick, but I read in the Times also today that President Trump had said at one point, well, I'm not worried about the oil because it's really the Asian countries that are most dependent on Persian Gulf oil. And while that may be true, it reveals such profound ignorance of what a fungible commodity like oil is like, right? If you pinch supply in one corner of the world, prices rise everywhere else. And you gum up the whole economy when you do that. So unless you're willing to impose domestic for the U.S., like export controls, right, where we keep our oil for ourselves, and that could also cause all sorts of problems. Unless we're willing to do that, the fact that this very important choke point in the global economy is being squeezed is also bad for the United States. It was just part of this broader mentality where I think the American right and the Trumpians got too high on their own supply. Yes, the U.S. is blessed in many, many ways. We became the world's largest energy exporter in the world. We have these two oceans, protecting us from any kind of immediate enemy or anything like that. So there's these natural advantages, this natural bounty that the United States has, and all Americans should be grateful for it. But there are limits, right? We might want to de-globalize, and I've never been a fan of the kind of globalization that revealed its limits during COVID, where suddenly go way too far flung, and at the imposition of the slightest stress, they snap, and we couldn't produce our own masks or protective equipment and so on. That was a problem, and we should move towards a globalized world. I agree with that, but still, we are living in a globalized world to some extent. So that this attitude of, oh well, beggar thy neighbor, it's just going to be China's or India's problem if oil stops flowing out of the Persian Gulf is stupid, and it's arrogant, and I think we're all going to pay the consequences for it.
And to that point, I think we have a good piece here. Let's put C6 up here on the screen. How the Iran war has already rippled across the world. Now, as you said, this is China or India's problem.
butter chicken has not disappeared from Indian menus because they don't have the cooking gas. To be able to make it, family, if you talk about family recently, they're rationing cooking gas and they're looking at it. Sri Lanka is taking shortages of the working and through seven, this is kind of the point of what you're talking about, is that the Asian shortage is already hit because of the way its tankers move across the globe. But what this map shows is that actually we're about 2 weeks away from some of the major impacts. It's simply because of length of the tankers. Now, the big question, as you said earlier, is about Donald Trump's speeches about climate any negotiated settlement, they will want some control over the situation. And we should try to negotiate that. But the point is that that looks to the U.S. like an enormous strategic blow, right? We've expended all this energy, and at the end of the day, you have to grant the Iranians do what they always possess, but not have to try to exercise in response to the war. That's a blow to U.S. strategic prestige. Really, I think we calculate what we can measure the scale of it. Otherwise, we're going to be facing obviously a bloodbath in November in the elections. You're still going to face that. It's only a question of how bloody the bloodbath will be. But if you think about it, there was a great tweet this morning. I saw someone said the objective of the war has become to restore the status quo and before the war done forever. It really is like, what is the point of this operation? Is to open the Strait of Hormuz, which was open so far we know. None of the other regimes hasn't collapsed. Its will has hardened. You know, it can still fire ballistic missiles at the front door in the New York Times today, basically saying, keep saying, 500% capacity. And that very evening, you know, an Iranian missile will fall on some U.S. facility in Saudi Arabia and destroy very kind of expensive command and control aircraft. So what's the point anymore? And again, I think that the end point will be some consideration, some recognition of Iran to control Hormuz. And that's like a Vietnam level debacle in terms of a blow to U.S. prestige, which hurts me as an American to think that we have to do that.
Saurabh, I wanted to get the reaction to Trump's tweet this morning, which obviously directly relates to the war and also relates to the economic appears to be another Trumpian vote. Treasury bond yield very closely watches on closely. He tweeted out or United States of America is in serious discussions with a more reasonable regime to end our military operation in Iran. Great progress has been made, but if for any reason the deal is not shortly reached, which it probably will be, and if the Hormuz Strait is not immediately open for business, we will conclude our level of stay in Iran, along and completely obliterating all of their electric generating plants, oil wells, and carb islands, and possibly all desalinization plants, which we have purposely left not yet touched. There's been pre-announcement over on Saturday. This will be in retribution for our many soldiers and others that Iran has butchered and killed over the old regime's 47-year reign of terror. Thank you for your attention to this matter. I think people probably know you're not a fan of the Iranian regime. You are quite a vociferous critic of the current government in Iran. But what do you make of what Trump is claiming here about how there's a new more moderate regime in place and he's clearly working on a deal?
First of all, I watch Iranian state TV 24/7. Just so we can, there's really the regime is there. It's called the Islamic Republic of Iran. It's become more militarized. What's happened is all the restraining forces, which, believe it or not, as much as a fan of not define my life, the course of my life would have been completely close, but they think that they have to, I'm going to use a polite word for it instead of what comes to mind. They think that they have the United States in an economic and energy vice grip, and they're going to squeeze until there is a kind of humiliating cry to uncle. And again, yes, they're going to take enormous hits, but this is a huge, huge country of 90 million people, 4 times the size of Iraq. It's going to take a long time for it to wear down. Long before that, the economic pain will be sort of too much for Trump. So that's the first thing, his assertion that Iran is, has the regime has changed. There's no sign of that. Second, the hitting of the desalination plant, actually Iran relies very little on these kinds of plants. It's America's Gulf allies and Israel that are much more dependent on these sorts of facilities, and as Iran has proved, it can hit those and create calamitous effects for lots and lots of people who live in those countries. And again, same thing with the electricity infrastructure, the power plant. They can do that just as quickly, except Iran's electricity system and the grid is far less centralized, so that if you hit a single plant, it won't have the kind of effect that it would have, for example, if you did an analogous thing, if they did the analogous thing to a country like Israel, whose power system is much more centralized. You hit one node and boom, Israel goes into darkness. So, I mean, these threats aren't, this is not some secret intelligence. It's all in the public record. So this stuff that he says. But it was funny when it was about Rosie O'Donnell a decade ago, this kind of cluster. It's really, really depressing. Everyone, the world surface of geopolitical and geoeconomic calamity.
And you don't decide that you're watching Iranian state TV. You don't decide that they're a piece of person talking Iranian, that you're listening to tell the public some sort of, you don't say any of that.
Not at all. Every night it's about revenge, the daughters of Ina, the school that got hit early in the operation. And this is a culture that thrives on martyrdom, Shiite Islam. So every time you kill a commander, it creates like a new, like a culture equivalent of Catholic things. Like it becomes some new basis. Or they killed they hit a police station, the Israelis did, and they hit a street sweeper, just like a random guy. So of course he becomes like this. His coffin is laid out, and people line up in huge numbers to touch the coffin and then rub it on their faces to get like a blessing from his act of martyrdom. That's the kind of people you're talking about. And again, so much of the perception about what Iran is, the kind of people, is driven by this. I'm part of it. This Iranian diaspora, very secular, very embittered. I understand the embitterment about the regime, but they led us, I think they led U.S. policymakers for years to believe that that's how all Iranians are, and forget that, no, it's a Shiite Muslim country. Lots and lots of people are not cynical about their religion. When you hear them, they talk about, Imam Hussein and martyrdom and Karbala and all this sort of iconography of bloody saints who give their lives for a greater cause. They really mean it. They mean it.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps us to know. This show helps support the future of independent media. BreakingPoints.com.
Enrico Memory Turkey supports short-term, long-term, and memory memory. Remember Norita. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Dispatches Live. I'm Rania Palik, and you're watching Breakthrough News, and today I'm very happy to be joined by Peter Parkey, Executive Vice President of the Quincy Institute, and author of many books, including Texas Alliance and Losing an Enemy, Obama, Iran, and Preparing for Diplomacy.